Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hammer Museum. I'm Claudia Bester. I'm the Director of Public Programs, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to tonight's poetry reading with the extraordinary MacArthur genius, poet, translator, and essayist A.E. Stallings. Before we begin, I want to remind you to please silence your cell phones. I'm also going to ask Avi, is this my light for tonight? Okay, great. And I want to invite you all to our annual Bloomsday celebration, a celebration of James Joyce's Ulysses that's coming up on June 16th. And this year's stage readings will focus on Molly Bloom. And we're going to have plenty of Guinness on tap. So please do come. It's a free event. And if you're not already on the Hammer's email list, please sign up on the paper sheet that's over there. Or you can use the QR code, or you can just go on the Hammer website to get notified about all of our upcoming programs. I want to extend my gratitude to the UCLA English Department and the UCLA Recreation Department for their continued generous support of this poetry series, and to all of you Hammer supporters and members in the audience who make this all possible. This poetry reading series began 58 years ago, making it the longest ongoing series of poetry readings on the West Coast. Since it moved from the UCLA campus to the Hammer Museum 33 years ago, Stephen Yenser has curated and hosted the readings, and we're very grateful to him. Stephen Yenser is a distinguished professor of English emeritus at UCLA and was the original director of creative writing at UCLA, where he received the prestigious Harvey L. Eby Award for the art of teaching. He's the author of 3 volumes of poems, as well as 3 critical books, and the editor and co-editor of at least 6 volumes by James Merrill. He's a lifelong champion of poetry and of poets, both through his critical writing and by his commitment to bringing incredible poets here to read for the Los Angeles community. He also served for over 40 years as a beloved teacher and mentor for UCLA students, advising scores of PhD students, as well as teaching courses in the writing of poems and in 20th and 21st century American poetry. Yenser will introduce our distinguished reader, A.E. Stallings, and we'll interview her following the reading. And after that, we'll have a book signing and some light refreshments. So now, please join me in welcoming my dear friend, Stephen Yenser.
We don't usually do that, but that's nice. Well, it's a good-looking my mic. Yes, thank you. Now, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, good. Well, it's a great pleasure to my voice, but I'll get over it. It's a great pleasure. Not to introduce, say something about Alicia Stallings' work. And please don't take it's not really. And as you will discover, if you don't already know, themselves. I mean by that they are forthcoming rather than withholding, that they invite they are yielding rather than demanding, which is not to say that there's not some resistance there, that there are not challenging, but it is to say, I don't think it would help, but thank you. I appreciate the thought. It is to say that her craft encourages real patience, those crucial aspects of love itself, which are among the chief qualities that the poet who produced them has. Her poems remind us that time, to be accurate, is That last proposition adapts a line from her most recent individual volume, Like. It's called just Like, as you will have seen. And you might have an opportunity to have them signed later on. Like, it's basically monosyllabic. The title couldn't be simpler. I'm sorry. I don't know what this is. Yeah, you can hear me, but that's the problem. Thank you. Think that'll help? Okay, God. I'm so sorry about this. I don't know what to do with this thing, Claudia. It's a brazenly monosyllabic title, title couldn't be simpler or more manifestly manifold as far as that goes. Like is a preposition, of course, that we find in similes and infer in metaphors, both as abundant and gratifying in Alicia's verse, as thrumba olives in Greece. But it is also a verb, like, here mildly imperative, suggesting that the reader appreciate the volume's contents. It's a suggestion that should be taken up. One can't but respond, I think, with to the volume's contents. It's there's such affinity in the poems for the language itself. Her title further works in informal conjunction, as an informal conjunction, as in she looks like she really means it, and she does. It has some other functions as well, including adjectival, which means similar, of course, as in the observation that those two poets have a like manner, which one might say, so I venture, so I don't know if anybody will agree with me, is the case with A.E. Stallings and James Merrill. Going over her poems recently, again, I was struck time and again by some affinities. And it's not just, I think, because James and Alicia both have spent time in the United States as well as in Greece, and both have Greek and have translated from the Greek to the English. But their commitment to form is similar. And it's not just traditional venerable forms like the couplet or the quatrain, the sonnet, but also invented structures. In a tour de force entitled Like, the Sestina, the end words in its 39 lines refuse the centuries-old conventional rotation. You know, the poem, the Sestina has to repeat words in a certain order. There's 6 words that end the lines. I think it's 6, 1, 5, 2, 4, 3. As you go back to the preceding stanza, then you take the 6th word as the end word of the first line of the second stanza, and so on. Very complicated. But instead, Alicia's poem repeats the title word, like, at the end of every line, which is quite a feat. Her poem called A Jar, that's one word, as in a door is a jar. It falls apart soon into 2 words in the course of the plot of the poem, But it's a poem in tercets, each line of which contains a heavy caesura, which breaks that line into halves, and the half lines in the first part of each line rhyme with each other throughout the rest of that stanza, and the last lines rhyme with each other throughout the rest of that stanza. And each line then in the poem is really two lines, and it's ingenious and very interesting form. Elsewhere too, Alicia focuses on wholes on wholes divided into halves. Cyprian Variations is a 24-section line poem that begins like this. The heart is a divided city between two alphabets. The poem is set in Cyprus, and it concerns in part the island's uneasy separation of the Greeks from the Turks, as reflected in their languages. And each of its 24 sections is in English, of course, but each is headed by a Greek letter. Dualities and their tantalizing integrated wholes run throughout as we are continually aware of her participation in these two worlds, the classical past and the American present. Alicia might conjure Hank Williams along with Sappho on the subject of loneliness, for example, in just one or two lines. With a foot in each era, one is tempted to number her among the hawkers and peddlers in a warren in a section of Nicosia, where the vendors of woven stuffs, the menders of broken, obsolete machines, of chairs, hawk their wares, and especially the menders of souls, the last cobblers at their lasts. The pun on souls and lasts strike a chord that we hear frequently. She's also a connoisseur of the contronym, or the enantiotheme, such as ravel, which, as some of you know, also means to unravel. And she's very fond of that kind of wordplay. Our current contronym that's so frequently heard is cleave. Where you cleave to something, you hold it close, or you cleave something, you divide it. And some of her poems work with that very duplicity in mind. But I'm sorry. This is all too abstract and solemn anyway. Alicia's poems are lucid and ludic, both. They are concrete and exact, unlike this presentation, Alicia Stallings.
Thank you, Stephen, so much for that, and for those fine words and thoughts, and to Claudia for her introductory remarks also. Wonderful to be back at the Hammer Museum. It's been quite a long time since I was here, and part of this wonderful poetry reading series. So Like is my last sort of individual collection, but I have since then come out with a selected poems, and that was an interesting proposition to kind of, look back over several books and sort of try to pick out what the good poems are and so forth. But also you sort of start to see what your obsessions are, and the things that you keep going back to. And I'm actually going to start with the first poem in the selected poems, which happens to also be the first poem in my first book, Archaic Smile. And it's set in Greece. And it's a sonnet. I'll just read it. A postcard from Greece. Hatched from sleep, as we slipped out of orbit round a clothespin curve new watered with the rain, I saw the sea, the sky, as bright as pain, that outer space through which we were to plummet. No guardrails hemmed the road, no way to stop it. The only warning, here and there, a shrine, some tended still, some antique and forgotten, empty of oil, but all were consecrated to those who lost their wild race with the road and sliced the tedious sea once like a knife. Somehow we struck an olive tree instead. Our car stopped on the cliff's brow. Suddenly safe, we clung together, shade to pagan shade, surprised by sunlight, air, this afterlife. So the book kind of begins with that we're in an afterlife. There was a car accident that sonnet is based upon. My husband was the driver of that car. He debates many of the facts of the sonnet. To which I say, write your own sonnet. One of the things, so I've lived in Greece for a fair amount of my life now. But I was writing about Greek mythology and characters from Greek mythology even before I lived in Greece. So one of the things that's been kind of interesting looking back, or something that I've been remarking on to myself maybe, is certain characters that appear very early on and that I continue to write about periodically. So, there's some of those might be Persephone and Penelope, but one of those is the Minotaur. He comes in again and again and again. In fact, the poem I wrote most recently, we got this better. All right, the poem I wrote most recently, in fact, is about the Minotaur. So he is a character that recurs. I feel sorry for him. He just seems like the saddest of all the monsters. I don't know, I kind of identify with him maybe. But this very early poem about the Minotaur, and I think it was written in Greece, or it was written after I had at least visited Greece and had visited Crete, is kind of from the point of view of an archaeologist in the future who's giving a tour of the labyrinth, but as if all of this were real. So this is Tour of the Labyrinth. And this is where they kept it, though their own, hungry in the dark beneath the stair, and fed it apple cores, the odd soup bone, and virgins with their torches of gold hair. When howls were heard, they claimed it was the earth, subduction of a continental plate, put down their sherry glasses with thin mirth, excused themselves, and said that it was late. But when the earth did make a mooing sound, stones that had been stacked into the wall knelt to the embracing of the ground. Amid the gravity that struck them all, no one thought to go unlock the door. Archaeologists, amazed to find a skeleton they were not looking for, said it was the only of its kind. They've unraveled the last days of the thing. It lived a while on rats and bitumen and played with its one toy, a ball of string, to puzzle out the darkness it was in. Poor Minotaur. My son is visiting California here with me. We've been enjoying Los Angeles. We've been quite struck, I think, by the Waymos and the NAMIs and the Cocos and this, like all of these autonomous machines. So this is a very early poem, but I don't know, it speaks to me differently, I think, now than when I wrote it. It's called "The Machines Mourn the Passing of People." We miss the warmth of their clumsy hands, the oil of their fingers, the cleansing of use that warded off dust, and the warm abuse lavished upon us as reprimands. We were kicked like dogs when we were broken, but we did not whimper. We gritted our cogs. An honor it was to be treated as dogs, to incur such warm words, roughly spoken. The way that they pleaded with us if we balked, come on, in a hoarse whisper, as they would urge a reluctant lover. The feel of their warm breath when they talked. How could we guess they would ever be gone? We are shorn now of tasks and the lovely work, not toiling, not spinning, like lilies that shirk, like the brash dandelions that savage the lawn. The air now is silent of curses or praise, jilted, abandoned to hells of what weather, left to our own devices forever. We watch the sun rust at the end of its days. I do write almost exclusively in received forms, so sonnets and quatrains, syllabic sometimes, sestinas. But there was a point where I realized that received forms needn't even be poetic forms. There are many forms out there, and I'm very interested in convention because I think convention just gives you more room to play because you can fulfill that convention, you can be subversive with the convention. Anyway, I think that it just gives you more parameters. So this is a different kind of convention that I thought, okay, maybe I can write a poem out of this. I have many poems, not just about the Minotaur, but about particularly Hades and Persephone, you know, Hades being the god of the dead and Persephone being the lovely nymph that he seizes and takes down to be the queen of the underworld. So this is one of those Hades Persephone poems, but the form is a quiz. So this is First Love, a quiz. He came up to me, A, in his souped-up Camaro. B, to talk to my skinny best friend. C, and bumped my glass of wine so I wore the fairest stain on my sleeve. D, from the ground in a lead chariot drawn by a team of stallions black as crude oil and breathing sulfur. At his heart he sported a tiny golden arrow. He offered me A, a ride, B, dinner and a movie with a wink at the cliche, C, an excuse not to go back alone to the apartment with its sink of dirty knives, D, a narcissus with 100 dazzling petals that breathed a sweetness as cloying as decay. I went with him because A, even his friends told me to beware. B, I had nothing to lose except my virginity. C, he placed his hand in the small of my back and I felt the tread of honeybees. D, he was my uncle, the one who lived in the half-finished basement, and he took me by the hair. The place he took me to, A, was dark as my shut eyes. B, and where I ate bitter seed and became ripe. C, and from which my mother would never take me wholly back, though she wept and walked the earth and made the bearded ears of barley wither on their stalks and the blasted flowers drop from their sepals. D is called by some men hell and others love. E, all of the above. This one is called Jigsaw Puzzles. So and also, this is another thing I occasionally write about jigsaw puzzles. I don't know. This is a Merrill type of theme. This is called Jigsaw Puzzle. First, the four corners. Then, the flat edges. Assemble the lost borders. Walk the dizzy ledges. Hoard one color. Try to make it all connected. The water and the deep sky, and the sky reflected. Absences align and lock shapes into place, and random forms combine to make a tree, a face. Slowly you restore the fractured world and start to recreate an afternoon before it fell apart. Here is summer, here is blue, here two lovers kissing, and here the nothingness shows through where one piece is missing. So my son is here, and I'm going to embarrass him with some poems. Jason. All from when he was much, much younger. He just graduated from college. This one is called Hide and Seek. My son was pretending. He said, I am a shadow. He did this simply by shutting his eyes, inhabiting the same space as his body, while keeping all the light from coming in. I laughed and kissed him, though it chilled me a little how still he stood, giving darkness his shape. This is called Sea Girls. Not gulls, girls. You frown, and you insist. Between two languages, you work at words. R's and L's, it's hard to get them right. We watch the heavens flotsam, garbage white above the island dump, just out of sight. Dirty, common, greedy, only birds. Okay, I acquiesce, too tired to banter. Somehow they're not the same, though. See, they rise, as though we glimpse them through a torn disguise. Spellbound maidens, wild in flight, forsaken, some metamorphosis that Ovid missed, with their pale breasts, their almost human cries. So maybe it is I who am mistaken, but you have changed them. You are the enchanter. This is the last one of the Jason poems. Listening to Peter and the Wolf with Jason, age 3. Eyes wide open, grinning ear to ear, balanced between the thrill of fear and fear. He clutches at my skirt to keep me near and will not let me leave him by himself in the living room where Peter and the Wolf emerges from the speakers on the shelf. He likes Peter's jaunty swing of strings, the reedy waddle of the duck, the wings that flute up in the tree, but still he clings, even though for now it's just the cat peeking its sneaky way through sharp and flat. He isn't frightened of a clarinet and laughs at grandfather's bluster and bassoon, but keeps his ear out for another tune at the shadowy edge of the wood and coming soon. Where is the wolf? He asks me every chance he gets, and I explain each circumstance, though it's not as if he's heard it only once. You'd think he'd know by now. Deep in the wood, or under the tree, or sent away for good to the zoo, I say, and think he's understood. And weary of the question and the classic, I ask him where the wolf is. With grave logic, he answers me, the wolf is in the music. And so it is. Just then, out of the gloom, The cymbal menaces, the French horns loom, and the music is loose, the music's in the room. This is another Minotaur poem. So you'll remember, the story of how he comes to be. His mother, Pasiphae, is the wife of King Minos on the island of Crete. And Minos has promised he's going to sacrifice the first thing that arrives to him out of the sea to the gods. And, of course, it's this just amazing, beautiful, snow-white bull that's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever seen. So he decides not to sacrifice it, and that's a mistake. And Pasiphae falls madly in love with it. But this bull isn't very interested in her because she's not a cow. So Daedalus has to make a sort of mechanical wooden cow so she can consummate her love. And she falls pregnant, and probably King Minos figures out very quickly after the child is born that something is amiss. So this is poor Art Monster. Art Monster. My mother fell for beauty, although it was another species. Ox-eyed, dew-lapped, groomed for sacrifice. She had to devise another self to put herself in, something inhuman, or beauty could not possess her. Oh, daedal mechanics. She grew huge with hybridity, rumor ripened. I was born to be amazed. She fascinated me with cat's cradles, spun threads out of my hirsute hair shirt. I was fed on raw youths and maidens when all I wanted was the cud of clover. I was named after my stepfather, dispenser of judgment. No one called me my mother's son. Minotaur, they said, oh, Minotaur, you are unnatural, grotesque. A hero will come to slay you, a hero who jilts princesses on desert islands. It is heroic to slay, to break a heart, to solve the archaic puzzle in the basement, demonster the darkness. I await this patiently as I bow to the yoke of making, scratching this earliest of inscriptions on a potsherd down here in the midden, writing left to right, then right to left, as a broken beast furrows a field. Stephen mentioned this poem to me, so I thought maybe I will read it. This is Scissors. A lot of my poems have been translated into other languages, but this one is apparently very difficult to do that, or maybe impossible, depending on the scissors in the other language. Scissors are singular and plural. Uncanny. 1 + 1 is 1. Even in solitude, a pair, cheek to cheek, or on a tear, knives at cross purposes, bereaving cleavers to each other cleaving, open, shut, give and take, all dichotomy in their wake. What starts with sighs concludes in oars, his or hers, mine or yours. Divvy up, slice clean, slice deep in pinked jags, or one swift sweep, the crisp sheet where they met and married, the paper where the blades are buried. Swallows. Let's see. Okay, for those who are keeping score, I think this is Ottava Rima we're coming into. All right, swallows. Every year, the swallows come and put their homestead in repair and raise another brood and skim and boomerang through summer air and reap mosquitoes from the hum of holidays, a handsome pair, One on the nest, one on the wire. Cheat, 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 the two conspire to murder half the insect race and feed them squirming to their chicks. They work and fret at such a pace and natter in between with clicks and churs. They lift the raftered place, seaside taverna, with their tricks of cursive loops and Morse code call, both analog and digital. They seem to us so coupled, married, so flustered with their needful young, so busy housekeeping, so harried. It's hard to picture them among the origins of myth, a buried secret, rape, a cut-out tongue, two sisters wronged where there's no right till transformation fledges flight. But Ovid swapped them in the tale, so that the sister who was forced becomes instead the nightingale, who sings as though her heart would burst. It's Ovid's stories that prevail, and thus the swallow is divorced twice from her voice, her tuneless chatter, and no one asks her what's the matter. These swallows, though, don't have the knack for sorrow, or we'd not have guessed. Though smartly dressed in tailored black, spend no time mourning, do not rest. One scissors forth, one zigzags back. They take turns settled on the nest, or waiting on a perch nearby to zero in on wasp or fly. They have no time for tragic song. As dusk distills, they dart and flicker. The days are long, but not as long as yesterday. The night comes quicker, and soon the season will be wrong. Knackered, cross, they bitch and bicker like you and me. They never learn, and every summer they return. Thank you. I'm going to read some newer poems. So I sometimes have these ideas for writing series of poems. You know, I want to do a series of poems on this. And then I write 2 poems, and 2 poems is not a series. And then other times, you know, I realized that I had never written a crown of sonnets, and I tried, and I got 2 sonnets in, and it didn't work. So I was interested in, as I think all poets are, in this phenomenon that trees have of crown shyness, where very large trees, if they grow close together, don't touch. They leave this kind of little tiny river of polite space between each other. And so I was like, I could write a crown of sonnets on crown shyness, and I got two sonnets in. But I'm also obsessed with Homer and the Iliad and the Odyssey. So, in which there are many, many trees. So this is a sonnet crown, the short kind, not the really long one. So it's only 7 sonnets, don't panic. Which is about trees and about the Iliad and the Odyssey, and it's called Crown Shyness. The ancient epics do not overlap. Hector dies, Achilles is a ghost, the wooden horse is backstory at most or hasn't happened yet, a witch's trap turns men to swine, a living river burns, a dog lies pining on a heap of dung, a woman waits and is no longer young, a ransom's paid, a wanderer returns. So great trees grow, they tell us, putting down a map of roots that chart the underworld, as deep as topmost leaves reach up, unfurled into the blue sublime. And side by side, though deep and tall, they only grow so wide and hold aloof, not touching at the crown. They hold aloof, not touching at the crown, walking between their columns, Look above to see how skies a river delta of blue leaking through as puzzled light sifts down. How do they know? How do they sense the touch? We call it shyness. Is it courtesy and antique courtliness of tree to tree that somehow knows the border of too much? When Priam in his laden wagon came under the veil of night to meet his foe, and by the body of his son laid low, Achilles drew back from his savage brink to courtesy and said, "We are the same, though princes, we are mortals. Eat, drink. Though princes, we are mortals. Eat, drink." So all that bloodshed ends in a shared feast, stories, tears. Dawn kindles in the east, the westering stars go ashen as they sink, as neutral birds erupt in morning choirs. Mules shake their ears, their hides a-twitch with flies. There's nothing for the living but to rise and to prepare the wood for funeral pyres. The forest groans and braces for the axe. So many trees it takes to burn a man. 9 days they gather wood from every side. Between the trees there open up dirt tracks for mules and sledges. Now the thwacks allied in rhythms that no bard has ever scanned. In rhythms that no bard has ever scanned, the timber falls. Its timber when it falls and crashes into silence with its calls of birdsong and its rustling saraband, a library of turning leaves, its rings, a record of the years no needle traces, shade the annihilating sun erases, torn from the catalog of living things. It started with the catalog of ships, whole forests felled for keels, masts, spars, oars, hulls made black and waterproof with tar and pitch. The sight of the armada stirred the pulse of men more than the hair, the skin, the lips of beauty's queen, men later called a bitch. The beauty queen, men later called a bitch. She called herself that sometimes. Stood aloft upon the ramparts while the old men coughed and young men died, and thought how it was rich. No wedding could go off without a hitch. Men blamed her for their bloody-minded slaughter. She missed her ex sometimes. She missed her daughter. She'd go to Egypt and become a witch. There on the wall a fig tree grew. Its shade in summer made the city street a park where all the little Trojan children played, chasing each other round the wall, all games until their mothers called as it grew dark and they became a litany of names. The shades became a litany of names. They creep up to the trough of blood to drink, and now the fog clears, they can speak and think. His mother nears to say she never blames him for her death of, here her sigh is sharp, a mother's broken heart. His father, well, he lives in squalor, half a man, a shell. His wife, she plays those suitors like a harp. Someday he'll show his father as he grieves the orchards he was promised. 13 pears, 10 apple trees, 2 scores of figs and vines that make the best homebrew of vineyard bears, not strong as Agamemnon's sea-dark wines, but sweet and bright like light through olive leaves. Sweet and bright like light through olive leaves, the dawning of his homecoming. Yet still she doesn't recognize him, but she will, unless it is deception that she weaves. Has someone moved the marriage bed? What brute, he starts to say, and then he sees she smiles and knows they are well wedded in their wiles, bed carved from one tree, anchored at the root. In sleep, though, king and queen are like 2 oaks, grown deep and tall, and yet not touching quite. One dreams of battle, one of breaking yokes. One hears house sparrows, one the rhythmic slap of oars, one ravels, one swims waves all night. Their ancient epics do not overlap. This poem is Minotaur related. This was written during, COVID. The lockdowns in Greece were really very, very strict. You couldn't be more than 2 kilometers from your house. You had to text the government to leave the house. So it did become very confined feeling in some ways. And I started to think about not just the monster in the maze, but the maker of the maze. Maybe we're all the makers of our own maze. So this is, again, for those keeping track, this is a villanelle. So you're going to hear 2 rhyme sounds kind of intertwining, and you're going to hear some repeated lines. And this is called deedle, which is an English word meaning beautifully worked, complicated, not a very common English word, but it's after Daedalus, the maker of the labyrinth. To build a labyrinth, it takes a twisted mind, a puzzled art, a fractal branching of mistakes. Drag out the shovels and the rakes, the spirit level, sacred chart. To build a labyrinth, it takes shadows, stones, shadows. I've lost my place. I'm in the labyrinth. I am lost. Shadows, stones, a way that snakes and ladders to its shaky start, an average mazing of mistakes, the kind that everybody makes, set random intervals apart. To build a labyrinth, it takes dead ends that seem like lucky breaks, the paths of bats that weave and dart through limestone caverns of mistakes. The shaken etch-a-sketch awakes a lost child buried in its heart. To build a labyrinth, it takes some good intentions, some mistakes. This is a poem about Echo, who is, of course, also a Greek myth, although, to be honest, a lot of these myths that we think about as Greek myths, we really kind of get from Ovid, but I won't go into that. So Echo, of course, we remember is this lovely nymph who is very, very good at telling stories, and everyone loves to hear her stories. And Zeus, Jupiter, figures out that if he can get Echo to tell Hera, Juno, stories, sort of like, give her soap operas or something to listen to, that she won't be paying attention to what Zeus, Jupiter is up to, which is mostly impregnating various nymphs and so forth. But when Hera finds out, she's very, very angry, and so she makes it that Echo can no longer tell her stories. She silences her, and all she can do is just repeat the last thing she's heard. And that, to me, feels very chilling. There's something about that silencing of the female storytelling voice that kind of gives me the willies. So this is also an echo poem, so that there will be actual echoing in the poem. The poem can be read 2 or 3 different ways. I'm going to be all the voices myself. So I'll read the whole thing through as one, and then, I'll do the separate parts first. Separate parts. So here's part of the poem. Echo. What tales we tell, what tales about the girls gone quiet, the storytelling ones, who entertained the heart till suddenly they ceased. What makes the tongue inert? What turns the voice to swords, cutting the throat? What takes the name from the alibi of the body? We were stern. Stories, we said, are lies, we told her. Don't repeat them. Here's another aspect of the poem. What ails? Yet once art eased hurt. Words, aches, I turn, ice, eat them. And I'm going to try to do both the things. What tales we tell, what tales, what ails, about the girls gone quiet, yet the storytelling ones, once, who entertained the heart art, till suddenly they ceased, eased. What makes the tongue inert, hurt? What turns the voice to swords, words? Cutting the throat, what takes, aches? The name from the alibi, I, of the body we were stern, turn. Stories we said are lies, ice. We told her, don't repeat them, eat them. I'm going to read a sort of political poem. I was commissioned by a journal, Liberty's Journal, for the election to write a poem the day after the election, and I said, I don't know how that's going to go, and I don't think I can do that. So I said no. But then the election happened, and then I thought, okay, what else am I going to do now? But the key, I think, often with responding to some kind of to current event type things is not to respond directly to them. And I had been thinking and writing a lot, I live in Greece, about the Parthenon and the Acropolis. And so I wrote about the Acropolis and the Parthenon, but I think you'll be able to triangulate. So it's called Ostracon. An ostracon is a fragment of pottery, or it could be a flake of limestone. It's like the ancient version of scrap paper, except paper was really, really valuable, whereas broken pottery was not. So you do your laundry list. But also, like in Athens, in ancient Athens, if a politician kind of became dangerous or outstayed his welcome, everyone would write his name on a pot shard, and he'd have to leave for 10 years. And that's called ostracizing. And it's a really good idea. So this is called Ostracon. Waking up in Athens after an election. I wake up in the dark. In dark I went to sleep. There is a kind of stark accounting of lost sheep. The day breaks with a dawn so much like yesterday's. I turn the kettle on and brew a black malaise. Things go from bad to worse. Let's call it entropy. The blessing is a curse, and treachery goes free or something. Never mind, here in the cradle of democracy I find there's history enough. There on the shining rock, the antithesis of state. She's suddenly like, if I got the second half of this poem. I just want to make sure I know where I'm going. This is the problem. I may have to abort this poem. Where is the second part of this poem? Well, all right. I will give you a little bit. Sorry. There on the shining rock, the antithesis of state, the subtle curves that lock the crooked to the straight. The centuries turn slow around its graven scenes. It took one night to blow the roof to smithereens. It boasts of Marathon, it boasts of Salamis, 4 generations on of hemlock's bitterness, between the city nations of Greeks warred tribe with tribe. Why trouble with invasions? It's easier to bribe. There's more to this poem, but I'm not sure I can find it. It's online. You can find it online. Unfortunately, I have my papers here, and that one got... Oh, no, here it is. Okay. Sorry. I don't know. I'm like, this poem wants to be blown apart. We still read Athens versions as though the Spartans lost, as though the prudent Persians did not know what they cost. Pericles died of plague and Phidias in prison. Divisions sown and vague suspicions have arisen. It took 9 years to build those columns in the air, but half its marbles spilled, some 70 to repair. It's like a foundered ship, that ruin on the hill. It makes my heartbeat skip. I'm afraid it always will. And I will close with a translation. This is a translation from the poet Angelos Sikelianos. He was the first Greek poet to be nominated for the Nobel Prize. He didn't win, but he's kind of an uneven poet, but when he's good, he's very good. And I love this poem because it is about John Keats, and it's about his visiting John Keats's grave in Rome. And the title in Greek is Yannis Keats. So he could have made it John Keats and just put it in English, but he could have made it Ioannis Keats and made it formal, but he made it like a Greek guy he might have met down at the taverna. Also, he sets it in the Odyssey. So he is like Telemachus, or Keats is Telemachus, and he is Pisistratus, and they're two young men off on an adventure. So it's also a reading of the Odyssey with Keats. It is also kind of an enacting of Ode on a Grecian Urn, because they are part of the sacrifice that has left the little town. And it's doing all these things at once, so that's kind of fun. So this will be the last thing I'm reading tonight. Yannis Keats. You'd meet me on the broad and shining shore of Pylos, so I'd planned, with Mentor's tall ship pulled up on the beach, snug in the sand. We would be bound, as though who sailed with the gods in the winged friendship of youth, and would take our seats in the stone thrones that time and custom had made smooth, and meet that man who still in the third generation reigned serene, a sage, whose tales of travels and holy decrees had ripened in his mind with age. At dawn, we'd attend the sacrifice to the gods, the ritual slaughters of the 3-year-old heifers, and hear the single cry that rose from his 3 daughters when the axe thwacked and the black-fringed, slow-rolling eye drowned in a swoon of darkness, and the gilt horns were rendered idle, a hazy half-moon. My love imagined you as a sister her brother in your virginal bath, how Polycasta rinsed your naked body and dressed you in a robe of fine cloth. I thought to prod you a little with my foot as dawn was about to break. The gleaming chariots yoked for us and ready, no time to lose, awake, and to spend all day in the talk that comes and goes, or silence when no one spoke, while we drove the horses who were always leaning one way or another against the yoke. But most of all, I wanted to see your eyes, your deer-like eyes behold the palace of Menelaus and forget themselves in bronze and the gleam of gold. Unwavering gaze, sinking the sight so deep you'd never remember the figured silver, the ivory gilded or white, the heavy amber. And I thought that I would say in a hushed voice, leaning close to your ear, watch out, my friend, because in a moment, soon, Helen will appear before our very eyes, the one and only daughter of the swan, and then we will sink our eyelids in the river of oblivion. So brightly I saw you. But what grassy roads have led me to your tomb, and the blazing roses with which I strew your grave and make all Rome abloom, light the way unto your golden songs, as though they were the brave armed bodies that turned to dust before one's eyes in an ancient, new-breached grave, and all the worthy treasure of Mycenae, the golden plunder I thought to lay before you, goblet, sword, and diadem, past wonder, a mask on your dead beauty, like the mask that covered the face of the king of the Achaeans, all gold, all artifice, hammered upon death's trace.
So what are we going to do? We're going to talk, is that right? to each other about things out there. Okay, all right. All right, let's see. Things. Well, you mentioned the Iliad and the Odyssey, which you haven't translated. No. You've translated everything else. She has a whole library of books that she's translated from Latin and Greek, but she hasn't done the Iliad and the Odyssey yet. I expect her to do the Odyssey.
I don't know. I think that's already being very thoroughly covered by many people.
Well, it is, but you have your own voice. But speaking of that, what is your favorite version of the Odyssey? Do you have one? I've been thinking that I might, but I'm not sure.
Well, what's your favorite?
Well, I think, see, I'm not sure, but I think Wilson's. I used to be, she's a woman who recently, about 5 or 6 years ago, translated the Odyssey, and I think it's a terrific translation. She does it in pentameter, and that makes for a very lively line to my ear. And I know Mendelssohn has done a recent version, which I think is good, but it has a long line, and it seems to me a little bit clunky and too full of the ancient day. So I like Emily Wilson's translation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it reads very, very well, and it flits along, and it's very clear. She's redoing it, though. She's doing a new version. And I've recently reviewed the Mendelssohn. I think I'm kind of I agree with you on a lot of aspects of that. It's very, very faithful is a terrible word, but he's very close to the text to the point where, and the notes are really great. But I do find that the long line and the spelling out of the epithets so that they become prepositional phrases, they can kind of pile up.
Yeah.
But it has wonderful aspects too. I mean, for many years I taught, like at Spetz's, I taught out of the Fagles. So I think I know the Fagles version best, and it also reads very well. And I recently did a new introduction or preface or something to the Fitzgerald. I do feel the more the merrier, that every translation kind of brings something new. I mean, there's a wonderful, I think it doesn't get reviewed well, or it doesn't have a great critical reputation, but Lawrence of Arabia did a prose version, and T.E. Lawrence, and it's kind of crazy. He does it as a novel. Like he doesn't even have this complicated man or whatever, that whole debate about it. He just skips that whole opening. And his thing is, that he's particularly qualified to do a translation because he has killed lions, strung bows, woven cloth, handled Bronze Age implements, killed many men, and sailed ships. And, luckily, I think generally as a translator, you're not really required to have done everything in the text. And there's a really delightful, if you are a real Odyssey buff, there is an absolutely wonderful, slim novel by Robert Graves called Homer's Daughter. And it picks up this wonderful theory of Samuel Butler's, that the authoress of the Odyssey, that the Odyssey has to have been composed by a young unmarried woman who's like a genius, but she's not married, because if she were married, she wouldn't have the time to do and it's obviously a woman because she gets so many things wrong about ships, and and forgets in the fight scene that there are already like 20 axes in the room. Nobody picks those up. And but he works this out in this novel, and it's just a beautiful, close reading of the Odyssey, and it's just really delightful. So I recommend that.
Like a lot of fun. I don't know it. I've never read it. I used to. You did Fitzgerald. You wrote a... I used to like Fitzgerald the best. That was a long time ago, before some of the books, the translations I just mentioned, were out. But I liked Fitzgerald because he was light, and it's again a pentameter line, and it's light and quick and witty. He makes little jokes which are probably not relevant to Homer, but little puns and so on that are out of place, but I found endearing.
It's kind of delightful. I mean, there are points where I think where Hermes is speaking and suddenly he's speaking in sonnets or something, and I mean each version is of its time. Fitzgerald is very much a modernist, and so he's also coming at this, but he was also Milman Perry's student, at Harvard. So Milman Perry is basically the author of this idea that there is no author of the Odyssey and Iliad. So he's kind of pushing back against that. I think it feels very pushing back against that kind of anonymous Odyssey.
Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I have an opinion on everything.
Well, opinion on everything.
Well, I mean, look, obviously there's an oral tradition that feeds into the Odyssey, but it seems very obvious to me that there is a controlling intelligence that is, choosing certain details. And, the Odyssey is very aware of the Iliad, so it's like responding in a very literary way, I think, to certain things. So sure, there are elements that are oral tradition, but I mean, even Milman Perry, for all, if there are any real experts out there, you can tell me off later, but, even like Perry and Lord, they go to Serbia or whatever, Bosnia, and they get these guzzlers or whatever they're called, I forget, but the oral bards of the time who can do these very long poems, 300 or 400 lines, but they give them like Raki to keep them going,
Right.
And then they make these recordings, and then they start like doing longer and longer, but it's because their observations are, in my opinion, that is not scholarly or expert, affecting this. And the truth is that none of these is a great poem. I mean, they have good moments, but nothing is like the Iliad or the Odyssey. So I think it's clear to me that there's a controlling intelligence in the Iliad, and there's a controlling intelligence in the Odyssey. I don't think it's the same controlling intelligence, but yeah.
Well, I'm glad I asked the question. I don't have an opinion about that. I hope for that controlling presence that you talk about, and I don't know how to deal really with the other point of view, but that's interesting. Do you have I'm not going to go on with this for a long time, but let me ask if you have a favorite Ovid. The Metamorphosis.
I know Charles Martin's best, and I think it's got wonderful things. There are two new versions.
One by a woman.
Yes, Stephanie MacArthur's, and then Luke Susie's. I may be pronouncing that wrong. I think Stephanie MacArthur's is very swift and clean. I think it's very much under the influence of Emily Wilson.
Yeah.
Luke's, I think, might be a little bit more in tune to some of the like poetic things that are going on. I mean, again, it's the more the merrier. I don't feel like any one thing is like it's the greatest ever, and this is not. Like I always want to have more translations on my shelf. I feel that you learn something even from a poem that you can read in the original. You learn from a new translation. You even learn from a bad translation. You look at it and you're like, oh, but often a translation will bring out something that you were just not aware of in the original. So I'm very much more the merrier with the translations. I also know all of the translators, so it's a difficult thing to navigate.
Yeah, I see. Are you translating anything right now?
I'm supposed to be. Yeah, I'm supposed to be doing a Georgics. It's a hard row to hoe, and it's not going very well. But yeah.
Okay. Claudia, up here, yeah. Claudia's telling me to really get down on this microphone. No.
We're wrapping up. I think we have to wrap up.
Oh, we're quitting. Okay, well,
Maybe we've answered all the questions.
yeah, well, I had a dozen more, but all right, that's fine. We'll quit. Thank you, Claudia, and thank you all very much for showing up. I hope you'll come back. We'll find somebody else with a voice to introduce next time. But thank you very much for coming out. It's quite an opportunity. She is really one of our great figures in American poetry.
Thank you.